What's up, Diablo 4 players? So today I want to have a discussion slash showcase of some of the interesting things coming out for Diablo. Now, I'm sure a lot of you guys, including myself, have already checked out the roadmap. And well, I want to say it was kind of underwhelming because I want to see a lot more stuff. We do have some cool things to go ahead and showcase here. So for starters, this is awesome that we're going to be getting these new sort of like dungeon modifiers. We'll talk more about this in a second. The thing that I was actually quite surprised by was that Rod Ferguson said that Diablo 4 has a 10-year roadmap. And I guess the first 2 years we're focusing in on fixing the game. And I'm sure if you got some of you guys remember where like resistances really didn't work in the very first season 0 section of the game. And they've been doing a lot of like reworkings of like the item power and stuff. But one thing that I was quite surprised by is they have a 10-year roadmap, which was actually 12-year roadmap, but I'm guessing because we already had the other 2 years. So it looks like we're getting an additional 10 years out of Diablo 4, which is kind of interesting because I was actually kind of ready for Diablo 5 to be something that they would announce hopefully relatively soon. But we also got the announcement of another expansion coming out into the game. But what I was actually really hoping for is getting all of the new classes. So I'm guessing maybe we're getting an additional 4 classes. If you guys want to speculate what are those 4 classes, you guys can let me know down below. Basically what it comes down to in this like article, you can see they quote Rod Ferguson, which is the guy that's GM of Diablo. He says that we're in it for the long haul. We have a long range planning. He doesn't really reveal anything. He just says I can't tell you much more than that. There is some other things that we'll talk about that kind of reveal a little bit more. But also want to go over this really cool thing that happened in the last few hours here is that someone won the cosplay championship with an Inarius cosplay. So that's kind of cool. So you can see the person over here. There's also another Lilith costume. Very very awesome stuff. But another thing that we thought was a really cool announcement that I really couldn't find the source of this, but someone mentioned here that Radar confirmed that in another post that they're working on more endgame activities, which I kind of assumed to see, and looking into the skill tree. I'm sure a lot of you guys have always wanted to see more evolution to the skill tree in Diablo, including myself, because the way it's kind of designed is you have your first node and you can put multiple points into it. And then what happens is then you get the next node. The next node you have to get because, well, if you want to select the other, top or the bottom one, you have to get that node. So first node almost doesn't matter because you have to select it to progress anyways. So I'm hoping that we can get, instead of like 2 choices, we can get multiple choices that would really affect the build and the way that the skill interacts. Because how it works now is the aspect kind of dictates the way that the build actually plays. Because if your build doesn't have like 2 or 3 aspects, well, you lose on a lot of damage. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of what they do in terms of the skill tree. Are they going to be making like certain modifiers to the skills, like in Diablo 3 we had like the rune system, or is it going to be more so kind of like an aspect where it kind of changes up the way that the skill plays? Maybe it works, short range, long range, but then you have always going back to the original thing that they kind of changed, which was like the damage on Tuesdays, because then, well, it's going to be affecting the way that the skill works. But they've been adding some really cool uniques. This is season 8 gameplay of like the Shards Sorceress, and this is awesome. So if they can do more of this in the skill tree versus requiring that item, yeah, I'm all about it. I'm curious to see what they do with this. Now, I was looking all around for like this announcement of it, and I could not find it. If anyone knows exactly where they said they were looking at the skill tree, someone please let me know the source of this. But that's going to be pretty dang cool because sometimes if they reply on Twitter. But I'll check out some of the other things here. You can see that there's an announcement recently that was mentioning that they will have a live stream before Season 8. And this is going to be very important. If you guys didn't know, I would say largely as far as most of the Diablo partners go, a lot of players were excited about specifically the powers, right? The powers are really cool. However, the game is getting way harder. Is that something that a lot of players wanted? I would say overall, it might not be the direction. So hopefully from the feedback that like I gave him from them as a Diablo partner, I gave it to him a while ago. They can make all these changes. Basically, I didn't really like making the game harder. I feel like it was unnecessary because you're getting essentially the same rewards. Also, mythic farming, hopefully, it can be adjusted in Season 8 as well. But they're going to have live stream, and more likely they'll be announcing what the changes are, because before, a lot of builds, they kind of capped out at like pit 60, 70. To do a pit 100, you had to run like the top tier build, which more than likely was going to be something that was going to get nerfed. But we'll see on that. Now, there was a mentioning of like the roadmap, and Radar did say that there are some good surprises that I think people will be pleasantly happy about coming up. So the only thing that I could see that they didn't like mention in like the roadmap, because there was a couple other people that work at Blizzard for Diablo that were reading on Reddit, because when people saw the roadmap, I'm going to be straight up with you guys. I was kind of underwhelmed with it, because all it was is like, okay, we have witchcraft powers, boss powers, heraldic powers. It felt too much of the same, and I think that we need more activities to do in the game. And we are getting this dungeon escalation thing, which is something that I want to talk about. So I did kind of like a mock-up of like what maybe this would be. It's not going to be guaranteed, but you can see that this is a nightmare dungeon over here, that we have these like escalations, right? It's going to escalate, right? It should be getting harder and harder. You can see that the dungeon affixes say amulet drop chance increase. So I think this is kind of a cool idea in terms of like the way that it could play, similar to the Undercity, where we can kind of like focus in on getting a specific drop, right? You can see it also, it says floor 1 adds volcanic while in combat. It does something that you have to dodge it, right? And then floor 2 adds monsters barrier, and then it's kind of grayed out on the other one. Now, again, this isn't like final. This is just someone's like mock-up of the dungeon escalation and kind of how it would work. But basically, it's going to get harder and harder because you're going to get more and more of these modifiers. And then you also get grim favors, and then there's going to be a bigger floor here. And then each floor reveals and adds random negative dungeon affix. So it's going to get harder and harder, hopefully with better and better rewards. The only thing I feel like that they can add in terms of like itemization, again, keep in mind this is all just like mock-up over here. I mean, this is not like confirmed or official. But as far as like rewards, right? Because unless we're going like mythics here, I feel like you only really have like greater affixes. So unless like you're dropping like more GAs and like GAs only, I want to say most players kind of exhausted the loot table of Diablo. Like as far as it goes, like unless it's a greater affix item, it almost feels like the items are worthless, especially once you're at World Tier 4. So unless they're going to be adding like let's say set items or maybe items that you can only get from this specific area, I would say, I mean, you can make things harder. I mean, maybe you can get an achievement for specifically floor 10 completed or something. Maybe you can get a cool cosmetic or something. But I want to say that overall, in terms of like making Nightmare Dungeons harder, giving players these things where, like, if you guys remember a long time ago, people complained about this too, where like there was like this little like bubble, right? There's this lightning storm, and if you didn't stand inside of the bubble, your character would basically get one shot. And this thing would sometimes move so dang slow that you just felt like the game was slowing you down unnecessarily. So it's going to be a big challenge, I would say, for the Diablo team to make these dungeon modifiers be challenging enough, but also not slow the player down to the point where they're like, dude, this is kind of more like a hindered experience versus making it challenging and fun. So yeah, really curious to see how they deal with the dungeon escalation on this. And then I'm also kind of curious to know, what do you guys think about other things that could be added that weren't mentioned here? Because we are getting technically another expansion. And again, if there's a 10-year roadmap, I'm pretty excited to see what this 10-year roadmap. I don't know if they're going to reveal anything relatively soon, but because there was an article that came out recently, this post was 4 days ago. But as far as this one goes, I'm not sure exactly the time of this interview, but they quoted saying that there is a 10-year roadmap, which I'm more curious to know, what do you guys think those other classes are going to be? So my guess, if you guys are wondering what my guesses are, I don't have any secret Diablo partner information, but if they do give us access to try out the class, we'll definitely do it. But my guess is some sort of variant of like the Amazon, because that was in like the key artwork. Amazon, I see this all the time because Pez Redder also hinted towards that it's going to be what the players want. I see all the time people commenting Paladin, so some sort of like holy class could be a really, really cool thing. I'm also thinking about maybe some sort of like monk holy warrior sort of class, maybe even the crusader. Now, Diablo Immortal is also getting a new class this year. Maybe it could be something related, but I know they got the Blood Knight, or like the vampire. I thought that was a really good class, so hopefully they can add that class as well. But who knows? And you guys can again feel free to comment. What are the other 4 classes going to be? Assuming that because there's a 10-year roadmap, we should be getting a few expansions, and in those expansions, more likely there's going to be a new class. That's kind of our incentive to go ahead and hop in. I'm sure that set items will come out very soon, as that was in the original design of the game back when David King was working on it. This is actually in like 2020, so it was like quite a long time ago. But that was in the design plans, and it's been so long, it's going to come out hopefully pretty soon. But anyways, that's going to wrap it up. If you guys enjoyed the video, drop a like on it. If you're new here and you want to be up to date with Diablo as well as other action RPGs, hit subscribe. It's gamers. And let me know your thoughts.